Good evening, everyone. I'm so happy to be with you again, talking about the life of Christ. It's a great blessing for me to be sharing this with you. I dive into the Bible and I remember my travels, and I hope that some of that wonderful spirit will come across to all of you. For those of you who watch this in real time, as we're streaming it, we will be having this program three Wednesdays in a row, even though the other pattern is something like second and third or second and fourth, or first and third, whatever it might be, it isn't. Because Swami's birthday and Swami's Moksha Day, the day he was born and the day he left this world, are very close to exactly a month apart. And they both happen on the same day of the week, which this year happens to be Wednesday. So it shifted us for tonight, and it shifts us for the month of May also. So 3 weeks in a row. So let's start with a prayer, and then we'll continue our walk with Jesus. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, Friend, Beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, Beloved Master Paramhansa Yogananda, Saints of all religions, dear friend and guide Swami Kriyananda, humbly we bow to you all. Help us as we explore this life of this wonderful avatar, this dear friend and companion and master and great love of our life, the personification of divinity, Jesus himself. Help us as we go through the episodes of that great life to feel the living, loving presence of Jesus within us, so that every story, we will be transported in spirit to feel not just the events, but the divine love and the divine power behind them, that we may be blessed as those who were present were blessed, with deeper and greater attunement, and may we draw ever closer to the kingdom of God within. Om. Peace. Amen. I'd like to begin our evening with one of Swami Kriyananda's songs. It's called What is Love? And it's not only a recording, as it happens, it's a video. It's a video from Spiritual Renewal Week, maybe a couple of years ago. And it is the choir singing, and it was mostly the choir from this community. Could it have been, maybe it was the 50th anniversary. It was the 50th anniversary. I was trying to think. It's in the new Temple of Light up there, which wasn't ready until the 50th. So it was the Palo Alto Choir plus alumni. And it just happens to be a beautiful recording, and you'll enjoy also the video that goes with it.
Is love, is it only ours, or does love whisper in the flowers? Surely we, children of this world, could not love joy laugh in every stream. Are the clouds mindless after all, or is joy all nature's theme? church binds him as its own, not a creed makes him fully known. Foolish greed, if we limit him, every atom is his throne. What is love? Is it only ours, or does love whisper in the flowers? Surely we, children of this world, could not love by our own powers. What is love? What is love? Is it love we touch in the flowers?
Listening to them sing, I want to say thank you. That was really beautiful. But of course, it's just now available to anyone at any time. The marvelous thing about the way the internet works is you can just put out energy in one place and it'll just keep on expanding. So now, let's go to where we were. The last session that we had, I had actually planned to do this all in one flow, but we didn't have time. But this is about Mary Magdalene. This is the section that's about her. And it is, there are different opinions about different traditions, but I'm following the ones that I've been persuaded are the true ones. There's the whole story about Jesus, about the woman who was caught in adultery, and how the law said that she should be stoned to death, and she took refuge at the feet of Jesus. And he protected her from being killed and said, he who is without sin, throw the first stone. And then the story was that Jesus wrote in the sand. And it doesn't say what he wrote, but some people say that every person standing there angry with a stone in their hand saw their own shortcomings written in the sand. And as a consequence, put down the stone and walked away, and the woman was saved from being killed. And Jesus suggested that now that she had been saved, that she should sin no more. Now, the story of Mary Magdalene is that she was a courtesan, and that she was possessed by demons, and that she was saved by Jesus. And there is a strong tradition that the woman caught in adultery and Mary Magdalene are the same woman. So later, there's also these stories where a woman comes and anoints Jesus' feet with costly perfume. The different Gospels put those stories at different points in the life of Jesus. One is earlier, and then another version of it has it happen just in the last week, just before he died. But when it happened is less important. So it's everything about the story of the sinful woman who came and bowed at the feet of Jesus and washed his feet with her tears and dried his feet with her hair. And this scene in the Bible, Jesus was in company with many others, being hosted. Others were hosting him for dinner, and she simply comes into the room and performs this extravagant act of gratitude and devotion Jesus allows her to do it. And the whole, well, there's so many dimensions of the story, but not the least is her absolute one-pointed determination to do this without any regard for how she appeared, about how other people saw her. And many of those watching, I'm going to read from the 2 sections in the Bible, were scandalized by what she did because it was so extravagant. And they were also somewhat scandalized because she was, quote, a sinful woman, and she was known to be a sinful woman, and there she was in such a close relationship with Jesus at that time, and some people thought somewhat ill of him for allowing such a woman to come so close to him and treat him like that. So now, I'm reading from the Bible, the section, Anointing by a Sinful Woman. When one of the Pharisees invited Jesus to have dinner with him, he went to the Pharisee's house and reclined at the table. Now the Pharisees, bear in mind, were the ruling priesthood of the religious establishment. They were the ones who ran the temple, and they were, as a group, they were wealthy, they were well thought of by society, and they were respected by the mainstream. So the Pharisee even inviting Jesus over was not what always happened. So Jesus was reclining at the table. A woman in that town who lived a sinful life learned that Jesus was eating at the Pharisee's house. So she came there with an alabaster jar of perfume. As she stood behind him at his feet weeping, she began to wet his feet with her tears. Now think how extravagantly she's crying, how profound her emotion is if there are sufficient tears to wet his feet. Then she wiped those tears with her long hair, kissed his feet, and poured the perfume on them. When the Pharisee who had invited Jesus saw this, he said to himself, if this man were a prophet, he would know who is touching him and what kind of a woman she is, that she is a sinner. Jesus answered him, saying, I have something to tell you. Tell me, teacher, the Pharisee said. 2 people owed money to a certain moneylender. One owed him 500 denarii and the other 50. Neither of them had the money to pay him back, so he forgave the debts of both. Now which of them will love him more? And here's, Jesus is reading this man's judgmental thoughts, doubts he's having about whether Jesus is really a prophet, whether he's really what he purports to be. And Jesus responds, according to this account of it, by just asking this man a question. And he knows what's in his mind. The Pharisee replied, I suppose the one who had the bigger debt forgiven. You have judged correctly, Jesus said. Then he turned toward the woman and said, do you see this woman? I came into your house. You did not give me any water for my feet, but she wet my feet with her tears and wiped them with her hair. You did not give me a kiss, but this woman from the time I entered has not stopped kissing my feet. You did not put oil on my head, but she has poured perfume on my feet. Therefore I tell you, how many sins have been forgiven, as her great love has shown. But therefore I tell you, her many sins have been forgiven, as the great love she has shown. But whosoever has been forgiven little, loves little. Then Jesus said to her, your sins are forgiven. The other guests began to say among themselves, who is this who even forgives sins? And Jesus said to the woman, your faith has saved you. Your faith has saved you. Go in peace. I love to think about that whole scene. And I love to think about how would I have responded? What would I have done? Would I have had the energy and the the insight to be able to stand with that. We have this idea, especially those who are very conventional in their thinking, that the masters and the saints should behave like us, that we are the epitome of right behavior. But the masters don't follow any social norm. They respond entirely and only in accordance with how God prompts them. So it's possible that if this woman had been insincere or had, base motive in what she was doing, Jesus would not have allowed it at all. But he felt the deep purity of her love for him. I saw things in Swamiji's life. One person I remember in particular. Very difficult person to get along with. Just never did really find a place with us. But Swamiji extended himself repeatedly for the sake of that person. And he said very simply, his love for me is very pure. And it just, that struck me so deeply. That person did not have many other things in their life didn't work. But they had a kind of love for Swami that essentially compelled Swami to respond. Swami had no, just the purity of that and the innocence of the way that love was expressed. That was simply how he had to respond. I think of that when I think of this story. And also I think of the woman's, if it was indeed Mary Magdalene, as I believe it was, she was already living so far outside of society's norms that it just meant nothing to her to please or displease the ways of the world around her. She had her heart for her teacher, and that was everything to her. Now here's this same incident described in a different gospel, and this time it happens between Palm Sunday and when Jesus was crucified. 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, where Lazarus lived, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. We'll go back to that story in a moment. Here a dinner was given in Jesus' honor. Martha served. Martha, Mary Magdalene, and Lazarus were siblings. Martha served while Lazarus was among those reclining at the table with him. Then Mary took about a pint of pure nard, an expensive perfume. She poured it on Jesus' feet and wiped his feet with her hair. And the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. Now in this case, it's Mary's own home. And she's welcomed Jesus into her home, and earlier Jesus has raised her brother Lazarus from the dead. So it's her world. She's not walking into someone else's world and just imposing herself. But Jesus has come to her home, and she has every right to treat him as she feels he should be treated. Now it's interesting, in the other story, Jesus contrasts Mary's devotion to him with the lack of attention from the host. So in this case, Mary is the host. But the disciples were all there, and this is a story about Judas here. But one of his disciples, Judas Iscariot, who was later to betray him, objected. Why wasn't this perfume sold and the money given to the poor? It was worth a year's wages. Imagine the presumption of such a remark. He was a guest in Mary's house, and this is what Mary has chosen to do. And he says, what a waste. He did not say this because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. As keeper of the money bag, he used to help himself to what was put into it. Jesus replied, leave her alone. It was intended that she should save this perfume for the day of my burial. You will always have the poor among you, but you will not always have me. Truly I tell you, wherever the gospel is preached throughout the world, what she has done will also be told in memory of her. So glorious. Now, Swami says, talking about Judas, and this of course comes up later, that Judas had a weakness for money. And so it would be in his nature that the first thing he would think of was money being wasted, because he liked having the money, and it says he was also a thief, that he took the money out of that purse. Now just be for a moment with, first of all, think about the kind of devotion and the kind of certainty. Now, it's the ability to kneel at the feet of the Master, to weep with gratitude for he's rescued Mary from a terrible, unhappy life. He saved her life, literally, rescued her from a very unhappy life, restored her to her own family. I mean, we're sort of expanding on all of these different thoughts. And she is so single-minded in her devotion to Jesus that she's not even slightly embarrassed in either of these scenes. He's a guest in her own home, but all the disciples are around, all the men who are disciples are around. Or she goes into the house of the Pharisee, where she probably wasn't even invited because she was known to be a sinful woman. She walks right in, she kneels at Jesus' feet, she weeps over his feet, she pours the perfume, she uses her hair as a cloth to wipe his feet. She has no reality except Jesus. And she also knows that he will accept this from her. And it's both sides of that freedom, because we may have a great loving longing in our heart, but we may become self-conscious. Oh, perhaps he won't want me to do this. You know, he's with other people. He wouldn't want this. Just all the things that you could think of, none of which occurred to Mary Magdalene. So there's in another context, I was talking about the childlike love, the childlike nature of pure love. And I was telling the story of Master's niece, the daughter of his brother Sananda, who was 3 years old in Calcutta when Master came back to India in 1935. She was 3 years old. She absolutely adored Master, and as a grown person, when I met her, considers herself a disciple in Master, her guru. The entire time Master was there, whenever he would come to the home, Shefali, her name, would absolutely insist on being on his lap, holding onto his leg. And there's many beautiful sides to it, but the most touching to me is it never crossed her mind that Master wouldn't want her close to him. And that childlike freedom to love without any self-concern. And Mary's love, of course, Mary Magdalene's love was from innocence to knowledge to freedom. That's 3 stages of it. But that's where Mary Magdalene had come. So now I have a few pictures that I'd like to show you representing this scene. And then Swami wrote 2 songs for Mary Magdalene that we'll also listen to. These are simply paintings that I found that to me spoke at least a little bit. And in almost all the paintings, you have the men at the table just not quite knowing what to do. And of course, this woman was a prostitute, so you don't know who the men were in the room and what her relationship was to them. So there she is bowing at his feet, and it gives you a picture of what the scene was like. Let's take the next one. This picture is by Heinrich Hoffmann, who painted the portrait of Jesus that is present in a lot of Ananda temples. Master said that that picture of Hoffmann, the one that we have in the Palo Alto temple and that I often show here, is actually a different painting done by, I believe, an Armenian artist based on the Shroud of Turin. But about the Hoffmann picture, Master said that it looked more like Jesus than most pictures. So his drawings are always lovely to look at. So let's look at the next one. This is my favorite because Mary looks so much like a child there. And you sort of feel the innocence of her relationship to Jesus. So while we keep this picture on the screen, let's listen to this song, which is the joy of redemption, which is in reference to Mary Magdalene being redeemed by Jesus. Only once? Yeah. The next picture, let's see what the next one is. This is actually Mary Magdalene when Jesus was resurrected. This is a Fra Angelico painting. I really always enjoy his. His paintings are on the walls of the San Marco monastery in Florence. He was a monk there, and he would go from cell to cell and paint his beautiful paintings on the walls, and then the monks would live with his expression of devotion to Christ. Mary Magdalene was the first person to see Jesus resurrected. And that's also, very, very telling about the degree of her devotion and Jesus' response to it. She also was the first person to see him resurrected because as soon as it was light, on the day, as soon as the Sabbath ended, after Jesus was put in the tomb, she ran to the tomb at the first moment that she could to do a proper preparation of his burial because it had been done so hurriedly after he died. When we get to that part of the story, we'll look at it more closely. But in the meantime, this is Mary Magdalene and Christ by Fra Angelico, who was himself a great saint. And now there's the second song that Swami wrote for Mary Magdalene, and this is Mary Magdalene herself as the singer, not literally, but the point of view is Mary Magdalene, just talking about what it is to be her after Christ came and rescued her.
The joy of redemption one sinner did learn, 'twas Mary of Magdala Christ saved. So purity she gained by devotion and by faith, by repentance she was pardoned in love. The joy of redemption one sinner did learn, 'twas Mary of Magdala Christ saved. So purity she gained by devotion and by faith, by repentance she was pardoned in love.
I've had to resist a certain temptation in this, which is to not make this a Bible study class. I'm just trying to sort of, we started out as a pilgrimage, but some of these places don't have physical places that I can remind you of, that I can present to you. So I'm just sort of taking a few bits and pieces here and there, moving into the last week of Jesus' life. So one of the things that happened in these last days, well, Jesus' whole mission was only 3.5 years, but as we get closer to the time when he's going to leave the body, he also commissioned the apostles, the 12 apostles. He commissioned them to be his emissaries, to teach in his name and to spread the word of what he was doing, because he knew that his time on earth was going to be short, and so that they would have to carry the message for him, and he wanted them to begin in that way so that when he was not there to do it anymore, the flow of his energy through them would also be well established. So here's the part in the Bible when he commissions the apostles and gives them, as he put it, the power to heal. Calling the 12 to him, Jesus began to send them out 2 by 2 and gave them authority to drive out impure spirits and to heal every disease and sickness. These 12 Jesus sent out with the following instructions. Do not go among the Gentiles, which is the non-believers, or enter any town of the Samaritans. Go rather to the lost sheep of Israel. Every master comes for a world-changing mission, but he also comes in response to the sincere call of devotees. As Swami puts it in the Festival of Light, a prayer of love went up from earth and you responded. And so there's always a nucleus of disciples and would-be disciples. And I talked about this a great deal already. The Essene community was that group. And so the much of Jesus' message, and depending on which sources you read, sometimes they just say that he went from a Essene house to a Essene house, which would make sense, All of this was long ago, and you think of it in very different terms, but the way Ananda operates and the way we have served Swami and Swami served the world as Master's emissary, we understand how these things are done. 12 are commissioned to go out, and they go from place to place, and they go where they are received well. They don't. Jesus' teaching was not to go and try to insist that people accept what he had, but to go where there were receptive hearts. Because the nature of an avatar's teaching is it has to be willingly and eagerly received. As many as received him, to them gave he the power. That's what John said, to become the sons of God. It wasn't go out and try to persuade people that they must follow me. It wasn't that way at all. So as he says, go to the lost sheep of Israel. As you grow, proclaim this message. The kingdom of heaven has come near. Heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse those who have leprosy, drive out demons. Freely you have received, freely give. He's telling them that which he has done, they can do. He goes so far as to say, raise the dead, cleanse the leper. Everything that I shall do, you shall do, in greater things, Jesus had said earlier. And now he's telling them, do not get any gold or silver or copper to take with you in your belts, no bag for the journey, or extra shirt or sandals or a staff, for the worker is worth his keep. Meaning you're serving the Lord will take care of you. In other places, look to the lilies of the field. See how splendidly they are dressed, although today they are in the fields and tomorrow they are burned as straw. Do you not think that your Lord will take care of you? The birds of the air, Whatever town or village you enter, search there for some worthy person and stay at their house until you leave. As you enter the home, give it your greeting. If the home is deserving, let your peace rest on it. Deserving, it says, but I think that what that means is receptive. Let your peace rest on it. If it is not, let your peace return to you. Jesus is telling us again, this teaching cannot be imposed on someone. It has to be magnetized. Jesus walking through the crowd, when the woman who was hemorrhaging touched the hem of his garment and was healed, he said, someone touched me. And his disciples said, everyone is touching you. And Jesus said, no, someone touched me. I felt power go out of me. So we're only getting just sort of a summary here, but knowing how these teachings work, we understand what Jesus is really saying. If anyone will not welcome you or listen to your words, leave that home or town and shake the dust off your feet. Truly, I tell you, it will be more bearable for Sodom and Gomorrah on the day of judgment than for that town, which is woe unto him to whom the Lord comes, and he rejects him. Because, now Jesus says elsewhere, not because I condemn him, but by his own actions he condemns himself. If one has the karma to come to the point of being touched by the power of an avatar and chooses not to accept it, it's not that the judgment of God comes down. It's that having come to the karmic point where that was possible and not opening yourself to it, it sets in motion a certain magnetism. Well, the way Swami and actually Anandamoy Ma also put it, there's a certain wave. And if you don't take it, if you don't have the courage to take it when it comes, then it passes you by, and you have to build up the magnetism to have it come again. Which is why Swami would often say, you have to act. You have to act in the moment. You can't just think, oh, I'll get back to it later. Right now I want to earn money. Right now I want to become famous. Right now I want to just enjoy myself in the world. And later, that's when I'll take advantage of this. But it doesn't work like that. When you have the karma to draw it to you, you have to open your heart to it in the moment. I've seen too many examples of that over all the years I've been part of it. Very well-meaning people just think, oh, blessings come easily, and I'll just not bother now and I'll pick it up later. But blessings don't come that easily. And when they do come, we have to receive them with our whole hearts. Then Jesus says, I am sending you out like sheep among wolves. Therefore be as shrewd as snakes and as innocent as doves. There's just so many wonderful things. As shrewd as snakes and as innocent as doves. Be on your guard. He's actually warning them. He's saying to these apostles, I'm sending you out. But don't for a moment think that the dark force is not going to try to counter the light that you're bringing. Sometimes we imagine because we love God, everything will be effortless for us. That's not so. The greater the light you put out, sometimes the greater the shadow. Be on your guard. And then he says, you will be handed over to the local councils and be flogged in the temples. On my account, you will be brought before governors and kings as witnesses to them. But when they arrest you, do not worry about what to say or how to say it. At that time you will be given what to say, for it will not be you speaking, but the Spirit of your Father speaking through you. So Jesus is also saying to take on this commission I'm giving you, you need to understand what's going to come. So, because of course, Jesus knew he was going to be crucified and they would be terribly persecuted, and most of them died a martyr's death. So then do not suppose that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to turn a man against his father, a daughter against her mother, a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. A man's enemies will be the members of his own household. Now that is somewhat of a literal prediction, but it's also a symbolic prediction, which is, do not mistake the call of God for self-realization for a comfortable, easy choice. And the enemies of one's own household are actually the various mental citizens of each devotee's own nature that he will have to do battle to transform every longing for comfort other than from the divine comforter to a realization that all energies must be transmuted into light. So he's talking on every level at the same time. Anyone who loves their father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. Anyone who loves their son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. Whoever does not take up his cross and follow me is not worthy of me. Whoever finds their life will lose it, and whoever loses their life for my sake will find it. So again, he's talking not only in external terms, but what we call our life, which is our self-definition of limitation, identification with the ego. If we cling to limitation, we will not be able to transcend into divine light. We have to give up. We cannot be attached. Father, mother, what that represents is all that we already know. And father and mother, of course, are the definition of the physical body that we've come into. And that physical body brings with it an identification with a limited reality. Anyone who clings to father and mother is clinging to a self-definition based on my limited incarnation, instead of embracing a self-definition that is infinite. So Jesus is saying, I will give you the power to raise the dead and heal the sick and cleanse the leper. All of this I will give you, and this is what you have to do in order to receive it. So then he says, anyone who welcomes you welcomes me, and anyone who welcomes me welcomes the one who sent me, which is to say, my Father who art in heaven. Whoever welcomes a prophet as a prophet will receive a prophet's reward, and whoever welcomes a righteous person as a righteous person will receive a righteous person's reward, which is less, but is still nothing, not nothing. Will you be seen as a true messenger, as a messenger of the avatar? The avatar is a messenger of the divine. Or will they see you merely as good people? And if they see you as good people, they'll get that reward. If they see you as a prophet, they will be lifted up, the same as the prophet is lifted up. And if anyone gives even a cup of cold water to one of these little ones who is my disciple, truly, I tell you, that person will certainly not lose their reward. After Jesus had finished instructing his 12 disciples, he went on from there to teach and preach in the towns of Galilee. So they set out and went from village to village, proclaiming the good news and healing people everywhere. Now, I think about all of that, and you think, you know, what would I have done? What would I have done? What kind of courage would I have shown? Would I have trusted that I could really represent the Lord? Would I have been afraid? Would I have been frightened if he told me he was sending me out among wolves? What's the difference with the life we have right now? I mean, we're being called just as surely as Jesus called those 12 apostles. That this is what we have to understand. The voice of Christ and of every great avatar is always the same. Our worlds are so changeable. We think that everything, is changing all the time. And it does, because that's the world we live in. But the world of the avatars is absolutely unchanging. And the call of the Master to be my representative, to carry my message, to represent me and represent the one who sent me, and to give everything we can. Jesus talks about driving out demons and healing the sick. Maybe we can't do more than be the one who gives a glass of cold water, but we can be that one. We can answer the call in however it translates into us. Now, the Bible is very full of the stories of the 12 apostles, but there's another part in the Bible that is really touching, and it's called the 72, a very exact number, although sometimes it's listed as 70. But that Jesus also commissioned 72 others who were also to go out. And in some parts of the Bible it talks about how he sent them ahead of where he was. And basically they were the advance team who prepared the way so that when Jesus came, people would be eager to meet him and would know who was coming. So after this, the Lord appointed 72 others and sent them out, 2 by 2, ahead of him to every town and place where he was about to go. He told them, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. And that, of course, is, I'm calling you, will you accept? Ask the Lord, to the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into his harvest field. Go, I am sending you out like lambs among wolves. Do not take a purse or bag or sandals, and do not greet anyone on the road. When you enter a house, first say, peace to this house. If someone who promotes peace is there, your peace will rest on them. If not, it will return to you, the same instruction. Now, there are many sources that say the Essenes were somewhat persecuted by the established religious tradition. And so they did not advertise their identity. They were somewhat secret. But their way of meeting each other was to say, peace be unto this house. So some say that this instruction was to go into the town and find the Essenes, find the kindred spirits who know about the Messiah's coming and are there to welcome them. So if anyone there, responds to your greeting, then you know you are among friends and begin to do your work. Stay there, eating and drinking whatever they give you, for the worker deserves his wages. Do not move around from house to house. When you enter a town, and this is also so fun because his instructions are, what's repeated are so complete. He didn't just say, go out and do whatever you think to do. This is the only part that's made it into the gospel. But Jesus gathered these souls and told them, how they were to comport themselves, where they were to go, how intuitively they were to guide themselves, even what they should eat and drink, because this is a big issue, because there were countless rules about eating and drinking. And so he was also telling them, take whatever they give you. In other words, don't stand on dogma. Give your heart and accept with gratitude, and don't feel that you're betraying or defiling yourself when you simply let God take care of you. The worker is worthy of his hire, is how he puts it. When you enter a town and are welcomed, eat what is offered to you, heal the sick who are there, and tell them. He's also telling the 72 that they can heal. The kingdom of God has come near to you. But some of this is duplicating because I have multiple gospels here. But when you enter a town and are not welcomed, go into the streets and say, even the dust of your town we wipe from your feet as a warning to you. Yet be sure of this, the kingdom of God has come near, I tell you. It will be more bearable on that day for Sodom than for that town. So once again, he's having them be a little bit aggressive. I bring you word of the Messiah's coming, and if you reject it, do not think that you can reject this gift from God and not bear the consequences of it. Whoever listens to you listens to me. Whoever rejects you rejects me. But whoever rejects me rejects God himself, the one who sent me. So the 72 went out with joy, and then after they had done their appointed rounds, they came back and said, Lord, even the demons submit to us in your name. So these 72 were filled with the Holy Spirit and came back to tell Jesus that your promise was fulfilled in us. He replied, I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven. I have given you authority to trample on snakes and scorpions and to overcome all the power of the enemy. Nothing will harm you. However, do not rejoice that the spirits submit to you, but rejoice that your names are written in heaven. Now Jesus is saying to them, it is not what you do, it's who you are and who you've become. And that is the cause of celebration here. Now, I have a picture I'd like to put on the screen and then listen to a chant while we, each of us, ask ourselves, if I was one of the 72, or even let's say we're one of the 12, and Jesus tells us that this power is going to come into us and that we are to go forth in His name and serve Him according to all the instructions He has given us, how would we respond? This is a Fra Angelico painting. This is actually Jesus giving the Sermon on the Mount, but it was such a beautiful picture of the 12 disciples sitting around the Master. So imagine yourself at the feet of the Master and imagine at this time that He's saying, go forth and heal and raise the dead and cleanse the leper. How would we respond? So we have this beautiful chant that Swami wrote, how shall I love thee?
How shall I love thee, Lord my God, with every breath I breathe? How shall I love thee, Lord my God, with every breath I breathe? Just as a fire may burn a whole forest, burn to the root my desires. Just as a fire may burn a whole forest, burn to the root my desires.
So now we're coming down to the most critical events, the last week of Jesus' life. And the story that I want to talk about now is the story of the resurrection of Lazarus. Now, as I was saying earlier, Mary, Martha, and Lazarus were siblings, and they lived not in Jerusalem proper, but just outside of it. When I show you some pictures related to Palm Sunday and the end of his life, you'll see it a little more clearly. But there's the city is on a hill. There's the Kidron Valley, and then there's the hill that's called the Mount of Olives. When we were, I have a physical picture in my mind because that's how this all started, was a physical pilgrimage. And when we were at the place Our Father, where Our Father was told, Pater Nostra, where the Our Father prayer was given, and we were looking at the olive groves there, and we were looking back. I believe we looked back at the city of Jerusalem. As I understand it, the Garden of Gethsemane and the place where Jesus would often go was this whole hillside here, and the town where Martha and Mary and Lazarus lived was just on the other side of that hill. And this is just a hill. This isn't a mountain. You can walk from the top to the bottom in a few minutes. So it was quite near Jerusalem. And Jerusalem, of course, being the place where all the center, the temple, and all the center of religious life was, and where all the powerful people in their religious life were all focused. And as I talked about earlier, Jesus would go in and out of Jerusalem. He would go up to Galilee, up to Capernaum, gathering all the devotees and having this. He was training his devotees, inspiring them. He walked everywhere. And the 72 and the 12 all walked and taught many people. And then from time to time, Jesus would come into Jerusalem, because he would come in and he would confront the established religious power to which he was an enormous threat. And it was eventually those priests who were holding on to their wealth and their position and their money that inspired Jesus' crucifixion, because his spirituality was emanated from the inside, and it undercut the power and position that they had. So Lazarus and Mary and Martha were all well known. This is a whole society in itself. So this is the story of Lazarus. Now a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. This Mary, whose brother Lazarus now lay sick, was the same one who poured perfume on the Lord and wiped his feet with her hair. So the sisters sent word to Jesus, "Lord, the one you love is sick." Now, of course, Jesus is raising the dead. Well, he's healing the sick everywhere. He's very close with this family, because you could see Mary's tremendous devotion, and the whole family is devoted to him. And now Lazarus is very sick, so what would they do? But they would send word to Jesus, "You've got to come." When he heard this, Jesus said, "This sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it." Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. Now I have to just tell you, this that I read from is all four Gospels put together. So sometimes situations repeat a little, but it's still a nice way to read it. Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was 2 more days. And then he said to his disciples, "Let us go back to Judea." "But Rabbi," they said, "a short while ago the Jews there tried to stone you, and yet you are going back." Jesus answered, "Are there not 12 hours of daylight?" Wait a second, where am I? Just a moment, I just want to know if I'm reading in the right place. Yes, I am. "Are there not 12 hours of daylight? Anyone who walks in the daytime will not stumble, for they see the world's light. It is when a person walks at night that they stumble, for they have no light." After he had said this, he went on to tell them, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I am going there to wake him." His disciples replied, "Lord, if he sleeps, he will get better." We have all these moments in the Bible where the disciples don't seem to get the point. Jesus says, he's asleep, we're going to go wake him. But, sir, we've heard he's sick. Why would you go wake him up? When Jesus helps the woman of Samaria at the well when her disciples aren't there. And then he says, "I have meat to eat that you know not of." The way Swami writes it, he said, and the disciples thought he had sandwiches in his pocket, and they didn't know where he got them. And he meant, my food is to do the will of the Lord and to bring this lamb who has strayed back into the fold. So he said, Jesus had been speaking of Lazarus' death, but the disciples thought he meant natural sleep. So then he told them plainly, "Lazarus is dead. And for your sake, I am glad I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him." Then Thomas said to the rest of the disciples, "Let us also go, that we may die with him." Now what they're talking about here is Bethany is right outside of Jerusalem, and the last time he was in Jerusalem, I haven't read all the intervening pages, Jesus is constantly provoking these powerful people, and they're constantly becoming irate because of his blasphemy as they see it. And he never shrinks, he never backs down, he never moderates what he does, he just stands up to them. Now these are the most powerful people in the entire culture, so you have to really think about this. You know, this is the police, this is the religious authority, this is the money, and Jesus just wanders in and speaks the truth in such a way that all who hear, and he speaks it in public, he speaks it in the temple, the crowds hear him, the crowds are following him, the priests are having this terrible dilemma. This is important to set all this up. The priests are having this terrible dilemma because they feel his power and they recognize that if he continues to gather disciples with this kind of commitment, they will lose their position. That's why it's a corrupt priesthood. It doesn't make any difference what priesthood it really is. It's that religion is one way to get power over people. And if you do it correctly, it's another way to get money. And they were doing it all that way. And they had this gigantic edifice which had, if you go back to the beginning of this series, I showed you the picture of that gold menorah sitting in the square in Jerusalem, which is said to be a replica of the kind of ornaments they had in that temple. And you see all that money, and you see all that force, and you if you remember the model of the Jerusalem temple and how it was at the top of the hill and totally dominated the city. And Jesus comes in and he's just a wanderer. He doesn't have a home. He doesn't have money. He doesn't have any power structure behind him. And he starts disobeying their edicts. He starts telling people they don't have to follow the rules. He heals on the Sabbath. He eats what he wants to eat. He encourages his disciples to disregard what this priesthood has told them they must do to please God. Jesus says they can please God. "Be ye therefore like little children, for of such is the kingdom of heaven." He also lets it be felt because, again, if you remember back to the beginning of our discussions, waiting for the Messiah was the very definition of what they were doing. And Elijah comes first, and so John the Baptist was there. Now Jesus is there doing all these signs and wonders. And is he the Messiah? Is he not? Why are they not accepting him? So all of this is really stirring up. And it's a brutal time. You know, Mary caught in adultery, they were going to stone her to death, just have her on the street and throw rocks until she was dead in a public square. So they're in great danger. And so now Jesus says, "I'm going back to that area." They said, "But when you were there recently, they were trying to stone you." He said, "Yeah, but I'm going back anyway, because I walk in the light of God, and therefore why should I be afraid?" So then Thomas says, "Let us also go, that we may die with him." And now that's a real disciple in the sense that if the Master says so, I will go. And if the Master leads me to my own death, I will gladly follow him. So it's a magnificent statement. On his arrival in Bethany at the home of Jesus of Lazarus and Mary and Martha, On his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, and many had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them in the loss of their brother, because they were all well known to each other. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. "Lord," Martha said to Jesus, "if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask." Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha answered, "I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day." Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this?" I mean, isn't that a moment? Now Jesus is talking to her about her brother who has just died. She's saying that you have all the power. Jesus says, I am the resurrection. Do you believe this? It's just thrown in there. But, of course, Martha's faith is also part of the power here. "Yes, Lord," she replied. "I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who is to come into the world." Now, this was hugely controversial as to whether or not he was the Messiah. So when he turns to Martha and says, "Do you believe?" "Yes, I believe." Has she told him this before? Has she said this to herself or to anyone else? We don't know. But in this moment when her brother has gone away, has died, she answers with great truth. After she had said this, she went back and called her sister Mary. "The teacher is here," Martha said, "and is asking for you." When Mary heard this, she got up quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet entered the village, but was still at the place where Martha had met him, because Martha ran out to meet him. When the Jews who had been with Mary in the house, comforting her, noticed how quickly she got up and went out, they followed her, supposing that she was going to the tomb to mourn there. When, there's a Jewish tradition where you sit in the house, I think for 7 days after someone dies, and follow ritual prayers, and people come. So it's quite likely they were following a ritual of mourning at that point. When Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." Now, is that a complaint? Is that a lament? Or is that just an affirmation of her faith? If you had been here, you could have saved him. But you weren't, so he passed. When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. "Where have you laid him?" Jesus asked. "Come and see, Lord," they replied. Then it says, Jesus wept. And those following said, "See how he loved him." Jesus, seeing everyone's grief, he was moved also to tears by that. But some of them said, "Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying?" So there's always conversation and controversy and all this going on. If he loved him so much, why did he allow him to die? Jesus, once more deeply moved, came to the tomb. Now, Jesus wept. This is a sub-theme that I've been thinking about a lot myself. The extraordinary play of divinity and humanity. I mean, Jesus had the power to resurrect him, and as it happens, he does. And yet Jesus wept because he felt the grief of everyone around him. Mary, Martha, all these others, their hearts are breaking, and Jesus' heart just feels what they are feeling. Jesus, once more deeply moved, came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. "Take away the stone," he said. "But Lord," said Martha, the sister of the dead man, "by this time there is a bad odor, for he has been there 4 days." In the King James Version, it says, he uses the word stinketh. This has been changed to there is a bad odor. But the fact that his body had decomposed, everyone knew it had decomposed, and yet Jesus says, open the tomb. No one would do that. Then Jesus said, did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? Slightly reprimanding them. So they took away the stone. It's just like, see, this is the interplay between faith and doubt. He says, I want to see him. He says, take away the stone. And instead of just rushing to take away the stone, they say, just a minute, Jesus, are you really aware of what's going on here? He says, of course I am. You said you were. Did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? So they took away the stone. Then Jesus looked up and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me. When he had said this, Jesus called out in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out! The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth around his face. Jesus said to them, take off the grave clothes and let him go. Now there's a story of Master resurrecting a woman who had died. And the way she talked about it afterwards was that she was just wandering. I don't know if she was in a field or where she was. And she heard Master's voice from a long distance away, calling to her. So she had exited her physical body. She was in the astral world. And Master was able to cross the distance between this plane and the spiritual plane and have his voice reach her. And at first it was distant to the woman who was gone. And she heard and recognized and responded. Now there's nothing in the Gospels, although certainly people must have asked Lazarus what the experience was for him, but there's no report. So I'll take that one. And then now Lazarus has been raised from the dead in front of many witnesses by Jesus' power, after he first speaks to my Father who art in heaven, and then with his own voice calls Lazarus out of the tomb, and Lazarus walks out of the tomb. And he's still wrapped in the winding sheet, so it's not a resurrection like Jesus's was later, where the tomb is empty. Lazarus was laid in there, wrapped in the winding sheets, and he just gets up and walks out. Therefore, many of those who had come to visit Mary and had seen what Jesus did believed in him. But some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. Then the chief priests and the Pharisees called a meeting of the Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin is the religious council. I think there were like 70 or so important priests who are all on that, and they were very concerned. Later, when Jesus is arrested, he's taken before the Sanhedrin. What are we accomplishing? They asked. Here is this man performing many signs. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him. And then the Romans will come and take away our temple and our nation. That was a lot of their thinking, was that the Roman authority, they were really an oppressed. The Jews did not have self-government. The Romans really ran their lives. And they were afraid that if a commotion, well, they said they were afraid of that. If a commotion was created, the Romans might crack down on them. So if they couldn't keep the people in line. Then one of them, named Caiaphas, who was high priest that year, spoke up. You know nothing at all. You do not realize that it is better for you that one man die for the people than that the whole nation perish. So Caiaphas is setting the stage for them to condemn him to death. He did not say this on his own, but as high priest that year, he prophesied that Jesus would die for the nation, and not only for that nation, but also for the scattered children of God, to bring them together and make them one. So from that day on, well, what they're talking about there is, this is the principle that Jesus, in sacrificing his life, it's the principle of the guru taking on karma, which was really true. Jesus did. He sacrificed his life. His disciples were greatly elevated by his sacrifice. And the sacrifice of Jesus is, according to the way the fundamentalist Christians describe it, that single sacrifice resolved the karma of everyone forever. It's partially true, it's partially not true. It gets a little confused. When we get to the crucifixion, we'll talk about it a little bit more. Better that one man should die than a whole nation should perish. So that's also interpreted to mean that because he was crucified, all the tribes of the world could be saved. So he dies, but everyone else lives because of his sacrifice. It's actually a beautiful teaching, and it's profoundly Sanatana Dharma. It's completely consistent with the highest teachings. It just has to be understood in the right way. So, after Caiaphas, who's speaking as the high priest, also not just as one opinion. So from that day on, those priests began to plot to take the life of Jesus. So Jesus, therefore, no longer moved about publicly among the people of that region. Instead, he withdrew to a place near the wilderness, where he stayed with his disciples. Now, there's one more little part about Lazarus, which I always really like. When Jesus, later, soon after, but when Jesus comes into Jerusalem on Palm Sunday and then teaches during that week, which ends with his arrest, because of this miracle of raising Lazarus from the dead, which so many people had witnessed. It happened close to Jerusalem. There were many people there comforting Martha and Mary when Lazarus walked out of the tomb. Many of those people had helped put Lazarus in the tomb. So there was no way that someone could say, oh, it was smoke and mirrors. It didn't really happen. It was a credulous person. It was a crazy person who said it. They just knew that Lazarus had been dead for 4 days, which is why when they first told Jesus that Lazarus was sick, he said, this is not a sickness unto death. He is ill for the glory of God. And then Jesus walked through this. So now, meanwhile, a large crowd of Jews found out that Jesus was there in the temple. This is after Palm Sunday, and came not only because of him, but also to see Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. So the chief priests made plans to kill Lazarus as well. For on account of him, many of the Jews were going over to Jesus and believing in him. Other versions of this say, if we don't kill Lazarus, we're never going to this is never going to work. We have to get rid of the evidence, or else the legend will never die. It's so intensely human. I love that little part just for that reason. Oh yeah, we're going to have to kill Lazarus too, or else we're not going to accomplish what we want. So I have a few pictures here, just a few pictures of just artist's idea of what it looked like when Lazarus was raised. None of these are great art, but they're sort of, they're just fun to be able to picture it. This is a Russian icon, and you see Lazarus over there, and he's wrapped in the winding sheets, and he's coming out of the cave. In this picture, and lots of them, you'll see people covering their noses because this idea that he smelled bad because he was decomposing, it's really not very valid, because if he was decomposing, he wouldn't be walking out of the tomb. But nonetheless, they throw in that little detail. Let's look at the next picture that I have here. There's again, this picture has Jesus in it, and it has Martha and Mary kneeling at the feet of Jesus. And we have Lazarus in his winding sheets just walking out. Okay, then let's look at the next one. This is just a different artistic style of him coming, and then you have the man in the background turning aside, presumably because the whole thing is too unpleasant, but it wouldn't have been. Lazarus would have been radiant in the glory, and they have the nimbus around his head to give you that idea. And then here's one more. There's very sweet, also with Jesus coming out of the tomb, with Lazarus coming out of the tomb and Jesus there, and Mary or Martha bowing at his feet. So we have, and this will be the last, we'll close the program with this. we have this recording of Swami himself singing, accompanying himself on a harmonium, singing the beautiful chant, "Who is in my temple?" We'll switch to the picture of Jesus and just enjoy the picture of Jesus along with this song.
Who is in my temple? Who is in my temple? All the doors do open themselves, all the lights do light themselves, all the doors do open themselves, all the lights do light themselves. Darkness like a dark bird flies away, flies away. Darkness like a dark bird flies away, oh flies away. Who is in my temple? Who is in my temple? All the doors do open themselves, all the lights do light themselves, all the doors do open themselves, all the lights do light themselves. Darkness like a dark bird flies away, oh flies away. Darkness like a dark bird flies away, oh flies away. Who is in my temple? Who is in my temple? All the doors do open themselves, all the lights do light themselves, all the doors do open themselves, all the lights do light themselves. Darkness like a dark bird flies away, oh flies away. Darkness like a dark bird flies away, oh flies away. Who is in my temple? Who is in my temple? All the doors do open themselves, all the lights do light themselves, all the doors do open themselves, all the lights do light themselves. Darkness like a dark bird flies away, oh flies away. Darkness like a dark bird flies away, oh flies away. Who is in my temple? Who is in my temple? All the doors do open themselves, all the lights do light themselves, all the doors do open themselves, all the lights do light themselves. Darkness like a dark bird flies away, oh flies away. Darkness like a dark bird flies away, oh flies away.